Hello, everyone. This is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the Music Masterclass. And hopefully you can hear me. There we go. Sorry about that. Music. So, as I said, I am Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and this is the Music Masterclass. We'll be talking about making music, talking about all the creative acts here of making music, composition, arranging, playing by ear, improvisation, all of these things. And today we're actually going to focus a little bit on the ear thing, different aspects of ear training. I'll expand a little bit on some of the things I mentioned in the lesson that I posted for the workshop earlier this week, and then we'll take a look at some music also that people have written, some SATB arrangements. So here I want to kind of briefly recap what was in the video for those of you who are not gold level members and haven't checked it out yet. The video, I'm talking about the idea of ear training coming from actually working on music. And I want to talk a little bit about where I'm coming from with this. So to me, ear training is, I'm not saying it has like no value to do as like an end in itself. I will say that I personally am not that interested in ear training as an end in itself. I am interested in ear training that is relevant to my music making. So I tend to focus on activities that will make that happen. We'll focus on the ear training in conjunction with whatever music I'm working on. And so this is something, just to go off on a little tangent, because I do that. I think about that in terms of like exercise also, like physical exercise. Like I ride my bike. I rode my bike to get to my studio today. I don't, on the other hand, like do weightlifting and things like that, and I probably should, and there's all sorts of reasons. Anyhow, I'm a big fan of incorporating things into your daily life, cross training, if you want to call it that. Anyhow, that's just where I'm coming from, but I do find it especially useful for music. So what we're going to do here is flip over to where I have the Bach B minor Mass, and this is like the second portion here, the Kyrie in a Mass, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. Bach did individual settings of each of those. Lord have mercy is a whole piece, Christ have mercy, a whole piece. Usually it doesn't go that way. But yeah, this, I shouldn't say usually, yeah, well, usually it's all one kind of piece combined, but Bach has them as totally separate pieces. And I chose to focus on the second portion, the Christ have mercy, Christe eleison, in my bad Latin pronunciation. So, and what I did in the video was talk through singing of this bass line, all right? So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to let you look at that bass line, because I don't know how many of you actually tried singing that exact bass line, but I want everyone to look at this bass line here, these four measures, and want you to look at it, and then I'm going to count off, and I want you all to sing, all right? So I'm not going to sing with you the first time. I want you to just look and try to sing. And then I'm going to sing with you, and then we're going to skip to other spots in the piece and try some other exercises. But this was the one that I walked through by talking through what was going on harmonically and how I use that information to help me sing it. So it's not just reading some notes and singing them with no understanding, but it's like working in the understanding. So there's our D. Let's sing a D major scale. You can sing whatever syllables you want, but I'm going to sing do, re, mi. So do is where I'm going to start, and we're just going to do it like on my thing. Just sing along, unless you're somewhere where that just doesn't work. But I encourage you to sing along if you can. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. At some point I started remembering hand signals. The reason I do that isn't, well, it's a vocal warm-up, I guess, but mostly I do that to get the sound of the key into my head. So, and then I will do other things. So let's do this. I'm going to sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, up and down. Do up to sol and then down. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Y'all do that with me? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And if you prefer to sing letter names or numbers, that's fine too. Then there's one other thing I like to do. Tonic triad. That do, mi, sol, do. And here, yeah, I'm gonna 1-3-5 it. I'm gonna sing 1-3-5 because I find knowing scale degrees is a little more my mode of thinking. So I'm gonna sing 1-3-5-1, and then I'll come back down 5-3-1. Okay. 1-3-5-1-5-3-1, and I don't actually remember the dang signs. That's sol, that's me, right? Okay, let's do that again together. 1-3-5-1-5-3-1. These are just things that I do that I find useful to me to get the sound of that thing into my head. All right, now now that you've been looking at that line, it is time to think about singing it. All right, so I am going to make this full screen just to make it a bit bigger. And I won't be able to see the chat for a moment, but I can look over at my other computer and see it. Actually, let me just get that chat back, and I'm going to pin it down into the corner. So I'm going to pin chat down into the corner so I can see chat while looking at the music. All right, here we go. Excuse me. Okay, so look at the line. And it's not a great key for me because it's going to be really low for me in that key, in that octave. But if I take it up an octave, it's too high. But I'm just going to do my best. But I'm not going to sing this first time. You're going to sing. I'm going to help out by playing the first note of each phrase. I'll sing that D. I'll play that D. I'll play that D. And I'll play this G over here. I guess I'll zoom a little bit more so that we can see the next note of the phrase, which is that A. We'll stop on that A here, all right? So here we go. And I'm going to count to 3, 1. Oh, no, I'll count to 4, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, D. D. A. So, this is something I want people practicing, but I'm going to tell you right now, I've looked at that line. I've thought through that line. I did a whole video on that line, and I'm pretty sure if I try to sing it right now, I'm going to butcher it. So I'm going to give you the pleasure of hearing me butcher it now, all right? So feel free to try to sing along with me, but it's going to be painful because I'm going to mess up. I'm not going to mess up on purpose. I just know myself. And I'm not confident yet that I could get that completely from just reading it. But I am going to help myself out a little bit. Here's how I'm going to help myself out. My analysis involved recognizing tonicizations and D, and then at some time I'm going to go to the B, ba-doo-dum. I kind of want to know that. And then I think that leap up to the G is going to be a little hard for me to find too. So I'm going to make an effort on that too. D, G is there. And then I got to make that tritone leap down. Yeah, I'm just going to do it. Here we go. You're going to try to sing with me, and feel free to laugh when I mess it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, D. Ba 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 do da da dum. Ba do da do dum. Ba boo dum ba da do dum. All right. I feel like my snapping was the worst part because I let myself get off beat. I got everything up to that G, and then I butchered the C sharp, right? I only went down to an E. Let me talk about what happened there. I'm looking at that line. Bum, bum is how it should go. But I have to think a little too hard to get that to happen. But what happened is I know that that's a 5 chord. Ba-da-da-dum. I know that there's an A7 chord going on there. And I I guessed wrong on which scale tone I was leaping to. I didn't go far enough. I kind of knew I was going to mess that up. I even said it, and then that's when I stopped myself and said, I'm just going to do the thing. And then I messed up exactly where I knew I was going to mess up. I didn't mess up because I don't know what a tritone sounds like. I kind of know what a tritone sounds like, but it's getting it in the specific context of the piece. Scale degree 4 to leading tone in the context of that 5 chord. In that context, I hit the wrong chord tone. So that's fine, and I can get better at it. But when I talk about this idea of using ear training in conjunction with learning the music, you see how much about the music I just learned or taught myself in my attempts to do that? That's what I want. I want you to, as you try to do these things, use that. Use what you're singing as an opportunity to try to learn about the music. So as you're singing things, I want you to learn about the music. So I'm going to find another passage in here that we've haven't looked at yet. I saw, Jimmy, you posted something about one, and I'm going to look at that later. But I'm going to just jump over and find some other passage here. So I'm looking for one that sort of feels to me like the right combination of challenging and achievable. And I should just go back and just pick one because I'm not going to find anything better. So we're going to go with this line right here, starting on this D. In fact, I'm going to switch to continuous view here. Make it a little easier to see. So let's look ahead at what's going to happen here. We have ooh, and then we're going to walk up that triad, and then we're going to walk up again, and this time we're going to end on the leading tone, and then leap back down to the tonic. I got to check and make sure I see that there's threads going on here, and just when you all reply in threads, that's great, and it's especially good if you do that for like just talks amongst yourself, because I won't see the threads unless I click on them, which I probably won't do while I'm in the middle of other things. So the threads, the replying to each other, is great for that sort of thing. All right, so anyhow, this one is walking up, and or not walking up, stepping up, leaping up, I should say, through that triad, but instead of going all the way up to the tonic, it stops on the leading tone, and then instead of resolving that leading tone by step up, it leaps back down. That's okay. That's still resolving. It's resolving with octave displacement, I should say, and it's not like a super common thing to do, but yeah, okay, you can do it. Bach did it. All right, now we have this pattern that is leaping in thirds and a tritone here, G sharp to B, and this little G sharp to D, but this little passage here is basically tonicizing that A. And so I feel like if I know where that A is, I have a reasonable chance of getting that pattern right there with the G sharp. So we're going to try that. We're going to start on this D and go all the way up to this B over here. All right? We're going to start on that D, and then we're going to sing to that B there. And this time I'm going to sing. No, I'm going to let you all sing first because I don't want to mess you up if you've got it better than me. So I'm going to count, I'll conduct, and you sing. D, 1, 2, 3, 4, D. Okay, that was that passage. And we're going to try that one more time with just you. And this time I will help out by playing a note at the beginning of first note of every measure I'm going to play. And then I'll try to sing it with you, and then we'll talk through that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, I'm curious how you all are doing. I'm not hearing anyone telling me about your singing experience here, but please let me know how you're doing. I also am curious if you all noticed the same thing that I noticed right there, which is uh, um, the pattern of the D, and then the first note of the next measure was C sharp, and the next note, the first note of the next measure was B. I suspect that was a deliberate thing of Bach's in creating that particular pattern there and the voice leading going where he probably was specifically thinking about voice leading of downbeats, but can't prove it. So I do see some comments in here that are good comments, and Allison's pointing out her experience playing an instrument. She's relating this to her instrument, and as you know, I often finger things on the piano while I'm singing, and I've also talked about my paper keyboard that I sent a link to. That you all can print, and I laminated mine because it's something I just like to have. And that visualization of those intervals really kind of helps me feel things out. However, thinking only in terms of the instrument, the physicality of playing the instrument, does have the disadvantage of not also teaching you about the harmony and about what's going on with the voice leading and everything else. So I again, from the cross-training aspect of it, I very much like the idea of bringing as many tools to the table as possible. And Jimmy, you're absolutely right that the accidentals create a problem. And that's why thinking through why they're there helps. So I'm gonna actually tell you what I'm thinking here. I have that D, and I know we're eventually working our way to an A, all right? Because this guy here, G sharp to D to G sharp to B, is basically tonicizing an A chord, right? There's an A chord in this measure right here. It starts on the third of the chord, so it's a little less obvious, but there's the A on beat 2. So this G sharp is there to tonicize that G sharp, and voice leading wise, that's the resolution. This G sharp is like a leading tone resolving to that A. So if in your head you can pre-think that A, you can think about where that A is going to be, you have a better chance of finding that G sharp. So I'm going to sing through a little pattern that's going to maybe help me there. D, B, A, and then G sharp, A. So I'm imagining the A that I need to resolve to. D, B, A, G sharp, A. So I just made up a little pattern that allowed me to find the G sharp by first hearing the note I needed it to resolve to. Now I can probably do it without the A. D, B, G sharp, A. It's a nice little arpeggio, right? Now there's all that other stuff going on that complicates that. But if I slow it down, I think I can handle it. So I want you to try this with me super slow. That measure there, the third measure. Do. I'm going to sing it real one note at a time. And you sing along with me. And I'll sing letter names so you'll know exactly where I am. D, F sharp, B, D, G sharp, D, G sharp, B, and you want it to go back down to the A, but it doesn't yet. C sharp, E, A. C sharp. Oh man, I want it to go to D, but it's not. It's gonna go down to that F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, A, B. There you go. So, by singing my letter names and telling you what I'm thinking while I'm doing it, I'm trying to give you insight into my own thought process here. I am not going to claim that my thought process is the right thought process. I'm not even going to claim it's the best thought process for most people if your only goal is to sing the thing. If your only goal is to sing the thing, there's probably better ways. But if your goal is to use the ear training as cross training to also understand voice leading and harmony, I feel like what we're doing here is like a great way, and I never see people really walk through it the way I am, which is why I spend the time doing it. So now, in slow tempo, I'm going to try to sing this with you, and you all can sing it with me. Okay? I'm going to do a little slower than I did before. Now I'll try it at that tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dee doo doo da bum. Boo ba da boo da boo da boo da boo da doo da boo dum boo da boo doo bum. Yeah, so you heard where I messed up, right? Right here. I kind of saw that one coming because I had to give myself a lot of help finding that one. So let's talk about why that happened. Why did I mess this up here? How did I get that one wrong? It's because my ear wanted it to go to D. I wanted it to resolve. But Bach was having none of that. Bach is not ready to resolve that sucker to 1. He is actually resolving, so this is a 5 chord, right? In the key of D, but he's resolving it to 6. He's resolving it to D minor here. And he's using this 3 chord in there also. So he's going from 5 to 3 to 6. I would still say that 5 is resolving to 6 and the 3 is just sort of in the way. Or you could say he resolved deceptively 5 to 6. 5 to 3 and then move to 6. I don't care how you conceive of it. The motion here is 5 to 3 to 6. Not all that uncommon, actually. Especially like in a jazz context, 5 resolving to 3 instead of 1 is super common. And then that would typically go on to 6. However, the rhythmic this is a real man, I'm glad this came up. That thing I just said, let me slow that down and say that again. In a jazz context, and not just jazz, a lot of music, it's pretty common to have a chord progression that goes something like this. 1, and then 2, 5, 3, 6. So, the harmonic rhythm is what I want you to pay attention there. I had a whole measure of 1, and then I had 2 beats each of 2, 5, 3, 6. 2 beats each. 2, 5 was one measure. 3, 6 was the next measure. And the reason that's significant is it sets up a return to 2 on the next downbeat. The 2 chords were the downbeats. What Bach is doing here, and the reason why it's a little off-putting to the ear, to me, and why I was struggling to describe what's happening here, is it's that same progression. It's 5 to 3 to 6, but the harmonic rhythm is shifted. The 5 chord is on the downbeat, not on beat 3. And then the 3 chord is on beat 3, not on the downbeat. The 6 chord is on the downbeat, not on beat 3. And you might think, that doesn't matter, but it does matter. How things are placed very much affects our perception of them. So when we hear 2 to 5 to 1 or 4 to 5 to 1 or any common chord progression, but everything is shifted by a couple of beats, it creates a little discontinuity in our brain. I like that I used the word discontinuity, and the name for that bass line is actually continuo. That's the name that's the name for the bass line in a figured bass. Uh, so that idea of shifting rhythmic displacement of a chord progression by a couple of beats does affect our perception of it and our ability to recognize what's happening in it and sing it effectively. And the thing is, it's going to happen all the time when you're dealing with counterpoint, because I want to point out what's happening here in the two voices. Look at what's happening in the two voices, not in the continua part here. Soprano 1 has an F sharp here on beat 2. 1. Hey, let's sing that line together, all right? I'm just going to sing it, and you all can sing it with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba do 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 dum. Is that right? I think so. 1. Ba do 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 da. Oh, I went up to an F sharp again, and it's only an E. I messed it up. All right, but notice then what the soprano 2 does. It's the same line, but down a fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest. 2, 3. Ba do 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 dum. So the notes are different. The intervals are a little different because these are all whole steps, whereas this one here is a whole step and then a half step. So this is called tonal as opposed to real imitation. And when we go through the harmony course, the counterpoint course, you'll learn a lot more about what's happening there. But my point is here, it's the same line, right? Ba do 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 bum versus 1, 2, 3. Man, I really wanted that to be an A sharp, but it's not. I also wanted this to be an A sharp here. I totally wanted that A to be an A sharp to tonicize that B, but I didn't get it, right? Again, things that I have to be aware of, think about why is this affecting how I'm perceiving the music, how I'm able to sing the music. But my point about the rhythmic displacement is because now we have the same melody happening offset from each other, 2 beats, it does mean the harmonies that get implied might not be the ordinary square kind of 2 on the downbeat, 5 on the offbeat, 1 on the downbeat, 3, where things fall relative to the bar lines is going to be displaced anytime you have imitative counterpoint like that. It's going to be very common to see that happen. Anytime you have imitative counterpoint, you can expect to see things shift harmonically, and you'll come to cadences in the middle of measures when you expected them at the beginnings of measures, and so forth. And this is one reason in Renaissance music we typically often didn't use bar lines at all. Not like I was around then, but often in Renaissance music, with all the counterpoint that's going on there, bar lines were not used or were only hinted at, written in at occasional places, and so forth. So there's different notation styles there. I'm again going to want to make sure that I'm not missing important comments here. So, anyhow, yeah, that is some stuff, and I keep looking up the clock because I do want to now flip over to look at some of your music. But this singing through of bass lines, not just as a sight singing exercise, but also as a harmonic understanding exercise, and trying to see how the two fit together. That's the little kick I'm on this week, and that's why we're doing this. So, something I recommend you all do is just find opportunities to do this sort of thing. And I do recommend doing it specifically on bass lines, because bass lines typically tell you about roots of chords much better than isolating, just singing the second soprano line. That's fine to sight sing that also, but it's going to be a little harder to figure out what's going on harmonically looking at something other than the bass line. The bass line is going to give you the best insight into the harmony, because even when there's inversions, you'll often be able to tell. And so, for instance, this G sharp, let me find like this A chord here starts off in first inversion, right? The C sharp is in the C sharp is in the bass, and I don't know. You can tell what's happening by looking at that arpeggio. I don't know if that really made my point. But often you'll see leading tones resolved by step, and so you'll be able to tell when inversions are used because of things like that. You'll be able to, even when you see a chord in inversion, it'll resolve by step, and that'll help you understand that it was an inversion. Does that make sense? Let me see if I just find a quick example to make that point a little better. Um, Probably won't find an example fast enough to make my point, but here's some more imitation. But yeah, if you see a note in the bass, your default assumption is the lowest note you see in any given measure is that root, right? This little arpeggio here, that A is kind of the root, and then this guy, the F sharp, is the root, right? So, and then in this little passage, the B is the root. In this passage, the E, the low note of that arpeggio, is the root. And then, so even when there's an inversion such that you're not hearing the root right away, or perhaps not at all, you can often still tell by the bass line. So by all means, work on sight singing melodies. By all means, sight sing inner voices, alto and tenor parts in an SATB, because that is its own challenge, because it's not the melody, but it's not harmonically definitive either, and it presents its own challenges, and we'll deal with those in future sessions. But the bass tells you so much about the harmony that is absolutely worth singing. And so here's unfortunately where the gender bias comes in that if you're a male and can sing in a bass range, you're getting a much clearer sound of the function of those bass notes. If you have to sing these notes an octave or two above, I'm not saying it's not valuable, but there definitely is a little bit that you won't be able to hear in your own voice in terms of hearing that bass note as a root of a chord as strongly as if it's down low. So you're just going to have to put yourself in the mindset. So I'm speaking to you ladies out there. It's you'll have to imagine, even though you're singing this note an octave or 2 octaves higher than what you actually see here, and it doesn't sound like bass, you're just going to want to put yourself in the mindset of these are bass notes, these are roots, and so forth, right? And yeah, imitation at different degrees of the scale are definitely things to know about. But one thing to know about is that right here, this guy right there, imitation at the fifth, right? The first line was F sharp, and then the second line was B. By far the most common, either fourth or fifth, right? Fourth above, fifth below, or fifth above, fourth below. Those are by far the most common imitations, just like those are by far the most common modulations. It adds one sharp to the key signature or adds one flat to the key signature, depending on which way you go. And so like when I saw this bass line here, starting off, right, that line there, I recognize that line showing up again right here, right? Right, it's the same bass line, but now it's a fourth below. Fifth above, fourth below, depending on how you look at it. And it's displaced by 2 beats. So that imitation is the most common type of imitation, but yeah, absolutely, imitations at other intervals happen, and yeah, you definitely learn in my counterpoint course about creating canons at every possible interval and things like that, and I talk about some of the ways of thinking through how that's going to work. It gets really deep, and Bach made a whole point in the Goldberg variations of introducing canons at every single interval to show how it could be done. So yeah, imitation is a whole fascinating subject that I'm really looking forward to getting into. All right, what we're going to do now, though, is flip over to some of our music, and Alani has submitted this piece quite a long time ago that I gave some brief comments to, but we've never really looked at in here. So I'm going to finally address that. I'm going to take a look at this piece, and I'm going to probably not go into super depth on any of these because I want to just say a few things about each one. But we're going to go ahead and just listen through to this piece here, and I'll give some comments. It uses counterpoint. So it's an SATB arrangement, but it is very much not a chorale style, right? So we're not going to hear four voices all in the same rhythm. We're going to hear a lot of that imitation. Actually, there's not that much literal imitation, but there's certainly a lot of different melodies happening at once. Anyhow, let's take a listen. Let's start it over again. So, some really nice things happening there, and as I was attempting to mouth, I love that fermata chord. That chord is just, it's like unexpected and yet so right when it shows up. So I really love what's happening there. So it's a G, a B flat. Is that a B a B flat? Wait a minute. Yep. So, what's happening on that chord? It's basically a form of this chord here, what we would call a French augmented sixth chord in terms of its arrangement of pitches, but it has a B flat here instead of the C that I would normally expect, and it creates its own different sound. So it's like adding an additional color on top of that sound, and it's being used as a substitute. Like augmented sixth chords, if you took the harmony course, you know that those are basically predominant chords, right? They resolve to the 5 normally. This is resolving to 1. It's more of the jazz tritone substitution sound. You could really think of this as a substitution for a D7 sound. That F sharp would be the 3rd, this guy would be a flat 5, and this guy is a flat 13. Normally would have been a C, the 7th. So anyhow, that sound is a nice voicing that colors the sound in an interesting way, and I like it. That's all I can say. Yes, there's a lot of this counterpoint going on, but when I talk about not imitation, I mean, notice that like this line comes in at the beginning, right? But then the bass comes in with a line, but it's not that same line. It's, right? And then soprano and alto come in with a line, and, right? So it's, there's counterpoint in the sense of voices entering one at a time, but it's not imitative. The one spot that I noticed offhand, there might be other bits of imitation buried in it, but this spot here is the most directly imitative. We have, and then in the tenor, right? So does the bass come in with that same line? No, the bass just comes in with footballs, with whole notes. So there's a bit of imitation there. There's probably a couple other little bits of imitation elsewhere, but even when it's not imitative, like this line here, when these two soprano and alto come in with, that's, they're in harmony with each other, all a third apart, right? I talked about that in a video recently, the idea of harmonizing two voices in thirds like Bach does on that very piece we were just listening to. She's got that going on, but this voice that's coming in is not imitating what just happened. It's not related to what just happened. It's its own thing. There's probably ways in which I could say it is related to something. She's using some more chromaticism here. That A flat in the bass gives it that's a Phrygian sound, right? That's the Phrygian scale. Starts off with that flat 2. And so she's got this Phrygian sound, but I do want to point one thing out about it. So I say it's got that Phrygian sound based on the bass. However, the melody in the tenor has an A natural right there. And then, which is fine, but then, there's also A naturals here in the soprano part and in the tenor part in that third measure, which is fine also. But that next measure, we have A flat here and A natural there. This is the most dissonant point in the entire piece to my ears. It is what is referred to as a cross relation. I think I use that term occasionally in the harmony course, but if not, you'll hear it more in the counterpoint course. The idea of having a note and it's a chromatic alteration of that same note in different voices within the same measure. In this case, we actually literally hear them at the same time. So it's definitely dissonant. But even if that A flat had left, if it had resolved somewhere else by beat 4, that would still be called a cross relation, hearing an A flat in one voice followed by an A natural in another voice. And there are some situations in which they're just fine and you do them, but there's some situations in which you kind of want to watch out. And in this setting, where you actually hear them both at the same time, that's definitely a watch out setting. So, yeah, you can do it. If it's what you want, do it. But be aware, it's a very dissonant sound. And so listen to it. If you write something like that, be aware that you just wrote it and then listen to it a few times and really ask yourself if you're okay with it. And if you are, then it's fine. Same with, parallel fifths or anything else like that. So, anyhow, that's what I want to say about Lonnie's piece. Nice job. All right, I'm now going to flip over to Jimmy's Dream is a Wish arrangement here, which is, also just really nice. And you're doing some things here that I like. This is like vocal arranging beyond just typical SATB stuff, just like Lonnie's was, in that Lonnie had actual counterpoint going on. What you've got going on here is more playing around with the different rhythms so that there's places where you've got long notes underneath the melody or moving lines against the melody, like in this place where there's that moving line. And I think it's very well done from that perspective. So it doesn't feel too chorale based in that not everyone has the same rhythm at the same time. It feels looser than that, more in a modern choral type of vibe. So let's hear Jimmy's arrangement of A Dream is a Wish. All right, so yeah, you've made some really nice sounds in here. And could someone fill me in? I can't remember. I mean, it's from a Disney movie, right? But which one? I'm so one. I can't remember which one it is, but I'm wondering now because this little part right here, doesn't that part like Someday my prince will come. Someday. Right? That line right there is totally stolen from another Disney song, or vice versa. And I don't know which is which. Okay, so LV Web Designer. Most likely, if you go, so let's address this here. If you go to the main community page here, click your profile icon here. That is where you will be able to find edit profile, and that is where you will be able to change your name. The way this thing is set up, it's possible you might have to go over to Teachable to do that, the school website. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think I'm only a week or two away from a big reorganization of things that will eliminate the dual sign-on sort of thing, and everything will just go through the community site and not the school site. So I will be implementing that within the next week or two. I'm committing to that right now, even though who knows if I'll follow through on that commitment. But that is what I'm thinking. All right, so let's talk about some of the other things going on here, other than the fact that the song itself borrows from other Disney literature, which is probably written by the same people. Isn't it? Is it Marc David or is it Mac David? Different guy. There's a few things happening harmonically that I'm not positive about here. And so, for instance, this B7 resolving to G. I'm wondering if that is in the original song. Like, I've heard the original song, but I don't know it well enough to be able to like call to mind, is this right? Is this not right? Or is this, reharmonized? But I am curious about that B7 resolving to G. This is basically dominant 3 resolving to 1. Okay, good to know that I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about Lenore, who goes by Lonnie, and I don't know. I just go by that. So this B7, 3, then going to 1, is not a common chord progression. And so, Jimmy, if you're still there, I'm curious, was that in the original that you were working from? Or if you added that harmonization, what your thought process was, what led you to that. If this were Someday My Prince Will Come, that 3 would resolve to 4. And I know we've talked about that progression several times. So that dominant 3 resolving deceptively to 4, up a half step, is pretty common. But going back to 1, less so. And I'm just trying to get into my ears what's going on. Similarly, right here. I'm expecting a C chord next, right? After a G7, I'm expecting a C chord. After a G7 with an F in the bass, I'm expecting a C chord with an E in a bass, right? So there's something about that also, of just coming back from G7 to a G triad, that feels a little odd too. And so my comment about the B7 going to the G feeling good is this might be one of those situations where your brain is hearing something, and then you're trying to find it, and the thing you stumble upon isn't quite it, but it sounds close enough, and you settle for it, when what you really heard in your head was something different. Now, I can't prove that that's what happened, but I can say that I've been in your shoes. I've been in those shoes many times, where I think I know what sound I'm looking for, either because I'm composing something or I'm transcribing something from a recording. I put down something that I think is it, and then only later on realize, oh man, that wasn't it at all, and then manage to fix it. Sometimes someone else has to point that out for me. So anyhow, I'm not so sure about that resolution there either. Here is now the Someday My Prince Will Come resolution. 1 to dominant 3 to 4, right? That is totally Someday My Prince Will Come, exactly right there. And this is exactly Someday My Prince Will Come. Then there's this really interesting move to minor. And that B flat in the melody kind of suggests that that's probably part of the original harmony. It could have been. It could have been a 5 chord there originally, in which the B flat was an on chord tone. But in any case, I like what's happening there. And I like that hint of the B flat here also, where it kind of plays with are we major, are we minor. You might, again, thinking about that cross relation thing, ask yourself if you really want to have that motion in the alto while the bass is saying major, right? Bass is saying B. Maybe the alto shouldn't disagree with the bass in that regard, unless it's the sound you want. It's a nice sound. But yeah, it's one of those questions to ask yourself. All right. Just looking at a couple other aspects of this piece. There's a couple other things worthy of mention. One is like this thing right here. I see it on paper. I want to hear it now. Okay, so I don't hear it, but I see it. Parallel fifths between downbeats, right? From here to there are fifths. Does the fact that the tenor moved get you out of it? No, it doesn't. As far as anyone's rules of this go, they'd say, oh, well, now you just have direct fifths or hidden fifths or whatever else they call them, where you're moving in the same direction and one voice by leap to a fifth. Yeah, that's you might want to see if you had a other option here. Like this F sharp to me here is quite expendable. It's the fifth of that dominant seventh chord there. And did we need it? No, I'd rather have had the seventh all along. So I a dotted half note A would have made me happier, perhaps. So that's something to think about. This is really good, right? You want that. This tritone resolution, contrary motion, exactly what you want. So that is really nice. There was another place, though, where there's another thing that I wanted to point out that is the books will tell you don't, and I say it's fine, is this, what you have going on right here. Root and seventh, and then root and third. This arrangement here, I mean, parallel sevenths aren't like a thing that you learn to avoid, but there's something voice leading wise that tells you, oh, well, that seventh probably should have resolved down to a third in F sharp, and yeah, your alto also wanted the third F sharp, and yeah, you could have given the alto the C, you could have found other ways of doing this, but my observation is, and I know, Jimmy, you've been working on your kind of jazz piano voicing thing. If you're playing jazz piano voicings, it's going to be pretty common to want root and seventh or root and third in your left hand. But all things considered, root and seventh ends up being used more often for a variety of reasons. One is that the spacing is nice. It's spaced out a little more and allows the bass note to get nice and low. Right? If you tried root and third here, it's a little muddy. So having root and seventh for that chord is really good. Also, from a doubling perspective, the melody is the third of the chord, right? And that's pretty common. Melodies are often thirds of chords. So having the root and seventh and I'm thinking of this as like a piano arrangement as opposed to a vocal arrangement, but the same principles apply. It's going to be pretty common that if the melody is the third, that a root and seventh in the left hand is going to make a ton of sense. It's a good spacing, gets the bass into a good range, it avoids the doubling that you don't need. So it's great, and so you're going to have root and seventh more often than root and third because of those considerations. And therefore, that leaping from root and seventh to root and seventh is going to happen reasonably often. And so don't sweat it when it does. I'm pointing it out there to say, I see you did that and it's okay. You can totally do it more if you want. But it's also nice that sometimes you have your root and seventh resolve to root and third. Because when you can, sure, why not? So in any case, nice there. I'm going to flip over here to, this one I'll have to download, but I'm going to just check out Gijs's Gladys here for a moment. So yeah, anyhow, Jimmy, good job on that. I like all the sounds there. But those are just some comments for some other things to possibly work on. So here is Gijs's Gladys. And you notice I am kind of, when I'm doing these quickly run through stuff, I will prefer ones that are posted to MuseScore.com, because then all I have to do is click and don't have to download anything. So by all means, when possible, I'll recommend that. Okay, so I did that last thing because that final cadence is fascinating. I want to come back to it. So another really nice thing here, arrangement from, well, it's an original composition from Gijs. And I remember you were telling me about the system of translating the letters of the name into pitches and using that, and it was like a challenge that from some other website or something. You could maybe remind me of the details if you're here, but I know that at least the impetus for this was some direct transliteration of letters of the name, and then what can you do with it? So when I say that I prefer having things on MuseScore.com, the one downside of it is if it's transposed like this, it means I have to think about transposition. All right, well, I'm a musician. I even play the clarinet. I should be able to handle this transposition, but I'm not good at it, so I have to think through things a little bit. And let me tell you a little bit about my thinking here. So like right now, just looking at this line, I see that there's an accidental here, but I'm not sure what's going on with it, and I want to listen to that line. So, could you hear that? I want you all to tell me in your words what's going on. You can think through the transposition, but I want to do that. I just want to listen and ask yourself, why is there an accidental there? Why is that accidental there? What's going on harmonically that I can tell by listening to it without even looking at it? Here's what I tell you. So by all means, put it in the chat, and while it catches up, I will give you my answer. That final chord that it landed on is an E flat chord. Right? This is an E flat chord. So if, right, that 2 flat times key signature here doesn't tell us is this B flat major or G minor, and there's elements of both in there. So I don't know whether I'm going to call this E flat the 4 chord, which is what it would be in B flat major, or if I'll call it the flat 6 chord, which is what I would call it in G minor. But what I will say is that this chord before it is tonicizing it. Can you hear that tonicization? Let's play that again. And can you hear that that chord on beat 3 is tonicizing the E flat chord to follow? So, is what I'm hearing. B flat 7 to E flat. Not that exact voicing. It's spread out a lot more. My fingers aren't going to stretch that far, but that's the basic idea. It's a B flat 7 going to E flat. So even without knowing about the transposition, I know that tonicizing that E flat chord, if I'm in the key of B flat major, let's just say that I am, and I want to tonicize the 4 chord, I know that's going to involve a 1 dominant 7th chord, and that note is going to that chord is going to have a non-diatonic note. And so I know that that's what that note is doing there. My ear told me that before I did the math on the actual transposition. I want to contrast that with the end here, because my ear has no idea what's going on here. I'm going to have to do the math. So yeah, my ear is not sure what's going on in that passage there. So I hear it again. One more. Okay, so yeah, I'm not sure what's going on harmonically there, and so I would need to do the math to figure it out. And now I need to know that that D sharp is really an F sharp. And so I've got a B flat, an F sharp, and a D. So this is an augmented triad. And it's mostly about the voice leading, I think. The next chord that we get is quite... Oh, wait a minute. No, that's an A also. This... And then that's an A. And then two A's, a C sharp. This is that, right? A, C sharp, E flat. It's that chord there. That chord is quite unexpected. All right, I'm expecting a 5 chord going into my 1 and an A. It's not that. It's not even F sharp diminished, right? That C sharp is a little bit of an outlier there. And so either that's a typo or it's just an interesting voice leading thing. I like to think it's a voice leading thing because D, C, D would be harmonically correct. Would be harmonically correct. It would give us our F sharp diminished chord. But this is a nice voice leading thing. It's just this half step thing. So sometimes chords form themselves through voice leading, and even though they don't have an obvious harmonic function, the voice leading wins. And that is one of the things that 4-voice SATB writing can teach you. Counterpoint can teach you as well, that sometimes following the voice leading will lead you to sounds that don't necessarily make a whole lot of harmonic sense otherwise, but the voice leading tells you it's okay. So that's a bunch of music, and time flew for me, and it's time though for me to move on. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks. I hope that some of you all were singing along when when we did those sight singing exercises before. I'm going to do more ear training stuff going forward here, but it won't necessarily be sight singing. Sometimes it'll be like that other thing that I just did, where we listen to a passage and then try to ask yourself what's going on harmonically. Transcribing, learning things by ear, writing, melodic dictation, or trying to just copy it. I play something, you try to play it back on your instrument. These are all sorts of things that we will be doing as part of this ear cross-training business. So, thanks again, everyone. And next week, you'll hear more from me about this sort of reorganization of the site that's coming. Nothing too scary. It's a lot of work for me, but it's not going to change your lives a whole lot, I don't think, except, a little bit for the better. Next week, you'll hear a little more from me about that. And then once everything's in place, I can start up the Counterpoint course. So I still can't give you a date because I need to wait until I have everything set up in place. But Counterpoint course will start sometime next month. That is the plan. So thanks, everyone. See you next time.